On the 30th of January 1607, around noon, the coasts of the Bristol Channel suffered from an unexpectedly high flooding that broke the coastal defences in several places. Low-lying places in Devon, Somerset, Gloucestershire and South Wales were flooded. The devastation was particularly severe on the Welsh side, extended from Luhan in Carmarthenshire to above Chepstow in Monmouthshire. Cardiff was most badly affected town, with the foundations of St Mary's Church destroyed. It is estimated that 2,000 or more people were drowned, houses and villages were swept away, and an estimated 200 square mile of farmland inundated and livestock destroyed, wrecking the local economy along the coast of the British Channel and Severn Estuary. The coast of Devon and Somerset levels as far as inland as Glastonbury Tor, 14 miles or 23 kilometres from the coast, were also affected. The sea wall at Burnham-on-Sea gave way and the water flowed over the low-lying levels and moors. 30 villages in Somerset were affected, including Breen, which was swallowed up, where 7 out of the 9 houses destroyed, with 26 of the inhabitants dying. For 10 days, Church of All Saints at Kingston Seymour near Weston-super-Mare was filled with water to a depth of 5 feet. A chiselled mark remains showing that the maximum height of the water was 7.74 metres or 25 feet and 5 inches above sea level. Described as the worst natural disaster that hit Britain, the flood of 1607 killed 2,000 people. It is estimated that the 200 square miles or 520 square kilometres of land that were covered by water. Eyewitness accounts of the disaster told of a huge and mighty hill of water advancing at speed faster than the greyhound can run and only receding 10 days later. The floods reached a speed of 30 miles an hour and a height of 25 feet. It swept up 4 miles inland to the Bristol area, North Devon, Pembrokeshire, Glamorgan, Monmouthshire and Cardiff, and up to 14 miles inland in low-lying parts of Somerset. But it's still not certain exactly what sparked the disaster that killed so many. For centuries it is thought that high tides and severe storms were to blame, a theory accepted by Dr. Kevin Horsburgh from the Proudman Oceanic Laboratory in Liverpool, who said a massive storm surge formed by a combination of high tides and hurricane winds may have been to blame. However, there is a tsunami theory. But a tsunami theory was put forward by experts from Bath and Australia in 2004, supported by evidence of deposits of sand, pebbles and shells at various locations around the Severn Estuary where floodwaters swept in, including a hill in South Gloucestershire. It is believed that these deposits may have been brought in from the open ocean. The florid description in the aftermath gave some hint to the depth of the water and the speed that it came in. The florid descriptions of the aftermath gave some hint of the depth of the water and the speed that it came in. William Jones, a writer of the time, wrote, "So violent and swift were the outrageous waves that pursued one another with such vehemence that the waters multiplying so much in so short time that in less than 5 hours space most part of the countries, especially the places that lay low, were all floodden, and many hundreds of people, both men, women and children, were quite devoured by the outrageous waters. Such was the fury of the waves of the seas, the one of them driving the other forward with such force and swiftness that it is almost incredible for any to believe the same." There was some Old English speech in there, which is quite difficult to translate, but I think I did a reasonable job there. It continues. In 1607, it was a little more than a year after the gunpowder plot, where the great propaganda of the time was anti-Catholic and increasingly Puritan. Within a lifetime, those forces of Puritanism would be such that England would have a revolution, civil war, and behead its own king. But in 1607, when presented with a great natural disaster like this, the reason was obvious. It was God's wrath on England for not being Puritan enough. There is little now remaining there to be seen but the huge waters, like to the main ocean, the tops of churches and steeples, and like the tops of rocks in the sea. Great ricks of fodder for cattle are floating like ships upon waters, and dead beasts swimming thereon, now past feeding on the same. So that's somebody describing the water was so deep that all they could see was the church steeples, and the cattle were floating and their food was floating, like all the hay and what have you. It must have been awful. And then another witness says, the tops of trees a man may behold remaining above the waters, on whose branches multitudes of turkeys, hens, and other such like poultry were fain to fly up to save their lives, where many of them perished for the want of relief, not being able to fly to dry land by reason of their weakness. And I did read another excerpt which I haven't put down to say to you today. But the guys that were up the trees, they were there for 2-3 days because they couldn't get down because the water was 6 foot deep below them. You know, such a catastrophe that presented itself. But it is still, is it flood or is it tsunami? I think this one will be left for the scientists and the rest of the populace to discuss and make their own judgment, because to be perfectly honest, none of us were there. I hope you enjoyed this little about the 1607 flood, and hope you like, subscribe, comment and share, and we'll speak to you again on another subject. Cheers. Bye bye.